All right, everybody. Welcome to another week of the Key to Games podcast here on Game Wisdom, where he's in the art and science of games. I am Josh Beiser, and joining me, my co-host is the indie game developer working on the game Samurai Pig, Joshua Reyes. How are you doing this very hot day
Hot,
here?
hot day. Yeah. Other than melting, I'm doing great. Had a busy week talking to some publishers with Samurai Pig, getting a build together. So wish me luck. Fingers crossed on that. Yeah. Other than that, I am kind of a little excited to talk about this topic. It's always been kind of in the back of my mind as an indie game developer myself. So excited to discuss this and really see what your opinion on it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is going to be another very interesting one. So, our topic is going to be discussing the line between copying and being inspired by another design. And this is one that kind of came up essentially from a video of this game Misplace. And the game itself
Isn't it
was
my place, Misplaced?
it
Or
was
is it misplaced?
it's hard to tell. It's again one of those very weird names for sure. And the game, oh, hello, Chris. And the game itself won or was a high ranking game from the IGN kind of game jam. I think they're doing like a video show or like an online show or something along those lines. And the game itself, from the footage, well, it looks an awful lot like Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, the Switch kind of remaster that they did. Or, yeah, it was a remaster, not a remake. It's hard to tell, again, remaster versus remakes.
Right, reincarnation.
Yeah, there we go. And people, when it got put up there, were attacking the developers. Probably one of the most strangest comments were people saying, oh, I hope Nintendo sues them, or, Nintendo's coming after them. Which normally, when we see people get inspired by Nintendo games, everyone goes, shut the hell up. We don't want you to know
Yeah,
about that. Yo, be quiet. As we saw with, what's it, Pokemon Uranium,
Pokemon.
Metroid Remaster, Metroid 2. Um, I'm sure there are, lots
Oh,
and lots
lots.
of other ones that I have never heard of or we shouldn't hear
The
of.
Super Mario 64 PC port, I don't even know how that's a thing.
Yeah, and I just saw people were covering there's a Kaizo mod for Super
Yep.
Mario RPG, which looks fascinating
Whoa.
to play and also looks like every possible copyright infringement you could imagine on that one mod for it. I'm
But
like,
you know what?
what?
But it would be. It's an amazing game, and people would love it, right? It
Mm-hmm.
would be like the best fan made thing ever for sure. And then anyway,
Yeah. And the other, yeah, and thank you, Drac, and yeah, and that also really helped when IGN called it a shameless Zelda
Shameless.
clone.
Yeah, I
Thank you,
watched.
IGN.
Yeah, thanks, IGN. He had, and then they did a little like I watched a little Twitter video. It was like 3 minutes, and basically they went over like every ad. They're like, Myspace opens chest. Zelda also opens chest. He cuts grass. Look at how they cut grass too. And he went over every single mechanic in there, and they were shameless, this and that. And then at the very end, they were like, but there more by it might be more to the eye or something. But the whole time it was just like
Oh,
a hit job on it. So,
mm-hmm. And it's also, I would say, there's some irony in the fact that people are, you know, rushing to jump on the sword to defend Nintendo in this case,
right,
as
right. Strange.
Nintendo is not exactly the most popular when it comes to copyright takedowns and cease and
Yeah.
desist in the
I,
game industry.
yeah, they're pretty much the heaviest hitters. Like, some of the other studios will kind of just, but Nintendo's coming for you. They will come for you and make sure that however they want it done, they want it done. Nintendo's big about that. So,
And
they're
again,
right.
and that's also why whenever we hear about some hot new mod or hack for a game, we can talk about it, but we're not going to actually name it in
Right,
any reasonable way because we don't want things to get too far out there.
right. Don't even link to the download or anything, man.
No. And it is, again, that very weird situation as an indie developer of how far can and should you go when it comes to other game design or copying it. I did that video or that critical thought, I think, 2 weeks ago at the time of this live stream, where I talked about, being inspired, all the vampire survivor likes and the boomer shooter likes and the Souls likes. I know we couldn't escape Elden Ring for at least 1 week there.
Every time.
And it is a tough line to walk, I think, for a lot of developers, because you are free to do whatever the heck you want when it comes to mechanics. You cannot trademark or copyright game mechanics or systems. Imagine like a world where someone could trademark, jumping or double jump.
Right. I mean, and so like really quick, we're already going to veer off into that. How Ubisoft that copyrighted the Nemesis system, which is like an AI type of design system, right?
I think you may be off. I don't think it was Ubisoft. I think it was EA. Let me see.
EA. But that to me was a very sad day, like copywriting a type of like, I would love to incorporate that type in my game, but I can't even touch that mechanic because it's a copyrighted mechanic, one of the few ones that exists. So yeah, just if jumping was copyrighted, if slashing grass was copyrighted, if opening chests was copyrighted,
Yeah.
I mean, what kind of game world would we be living in?
Yeah, and Chris beat me to it. It's WB Games that trademarked the Nemesis system or copyrighted it. And yeah, and Firaxis basically took that system when they did XCOM 2 War of the Chosen. And it was fantastic. And it is very surprising that a system like that was copyrighted. Another weird example of this was the idea of having mini-game loading, or loading screens that had mini-games.
Right. Namco? Did Namco do it?
Namco or Taito?
I'm going to get all of them wrong. I'm going to get them all wrong.
And, I like Nintendo Ninja's got blocked for Chris's comment there. Oh no, Nintendo's coming for us now. And hello, Jarpin Games. Yeah, welcome, Namco. Man. Thank you, Chris. Yes, Namco. They had like.
Was it Namco? So I got one. I'm one for one then.
And they copyrighted that system. I think the copyright ran out.
Yes, it did. It did. Like I can put that in my game right now, like no issues if I wanted to. Yeah.
Yeah, and that is where it gets very weird in terms of this. That you're not supposed to be able to copyright systems and games. Another very disturbing example of this, and this is one I talk about in my next book, is the Activision Blizzard monetization matchmaking system that they patented. I think it went in effect in 2020 or 2021, where the system will analyze how much people spend and will matchmake them against people who either spend more money, or if, let's say, you buy a really good gun, they will put you into a match that just so happens favors that specific weapon.
That is wild. That is, what's the word for that, Josh?
Insidious?
Yeah, insidious. We'll go with insidious.
And yes, I did read the actual patent. You can actually go online and look it up. They have it listed on the government site. And it is a very robust system there. And it's now, I guess it's technically going to be owned by Microsoft if, I guess, they officially go through the Activision Blizzard... Oh, I'm sorry, Activision Blizzard King purchase. Got to throw King in there, too.
King also?
Yeah, because I think Activision bought King. So it's like just this one...
That's right. That's right.
And as another weird tangent, I'm hearing that EA may be up for it being bought soon. Like, that seems to be the next rumor.
Right, we're gonna have to do a podcast on who owns everyone.
There we go. This we're gonna get bought by Nintendo at some point. Yeah. All the times we're being mentioned by it. And normally, again, that when it comes to systems, mechanics, things that do not have a quote-unquote brand attached to them, you cannot trademark or copyright that. Again, I made a video, if we want to do, Super Josh Brothers at some point and have us both be in platforming, throwing fireballs, Nintendo is not going to come down on us for that.
We'll be attacking bad game design and
yeah. Exactly. It's going to be confusing because we'll both have to have like a little J on our hats. Like, Nintendo is not going to come after you for that. But if we were to say, okay, we're going to be plumbers, and we're both going to have mustaches, and one of us will wear a red and blue suit, the other one will wear a green and blue suit. Now we're getting into marketable or brandable territory.
Right.
Another very big example of this is the universal ARPG health system of having, magic on the right hand side, health on the left hand side. That, of course, was popularized by Diablo. So if you want to have your health and mana set up like this, you can do that. But if you use that exact same, red, vial color here, blue vial over there, and especially if you take assets, that's when it just gets, completely no-no. That if
Yeah.
you take someone
Yeah.
else's assets and you put into your game, even if you, tweak it, if you are still using that original brandable asset, you are going to be in trouble for that.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's one thing. Like, I don't believe Myspace didn't do any of that. Like, it's just because it's
Mm-hmm.
reminiscent. But like any game that has like taken assets out of a game,
Mm-hmm.
like you're blackballed from the game dev community. Like that's you're stealing from the game dev community, right? And like there's no reason for you. Like, there was one about a tree. I can't remember now. But anyway, they took a tree out of a game and they
Mm-hmm.
used it in their own. And so, like, it's really easy to, I don't know, you can buy a tree. There's plenty of trees you can purchase your own. There's no reason to go steal the tree, right? Like, model a tree, hire someone to model a tree. You can get one, like, Blender has an auto generator you can export. So that one I
Nice.
find kind of weird, but yeah, definitely don't steal assets. You know what I mean? Like, stealing
Mm-hmm.
assets, I think everybody can see and nobody, always tripped me out about Flappy Bird using those pipes, though, man. Thought that
Yeah.
was real close.
Yep, and you beat me to it when I was able to say that you can, if it's a free asset or a purchasable asset from an engine, that is
Yes.
fair game. What
Fair
we're
game.
specifically talking about is, say, loading up World of Warcraft and saying, you know what, I'm going to take all the textures for Taurens, instead of being brown, let's make them green, and then I'm going to
Right.
put them in my game.
Yeah, and I guarantee you everybody was gonna recognize that texture set like before you.
Hmm. And again, it's a very weird position because I think like either last week or the week before that, we did the Kid Gamescast talking about being an indie dev in today's market. And a big point about that is that the bar of quality has gone up. And a
Way
lot
up.
has been thanks to the growing technology and software and hardware available. Like we said, that a two-person team these days can do 1,000 times more than maybe a 20 to 30 person team did 30, 40 years ago.
The game Myspace that we bought up,
Yeah.
the studio's Clear Blue Skies, Clear Skies. I'm gonna get that one wrong. But they're a two-person team that are
Mm-hmm.
making that game. So, little two-person team, and they got out and they're now under a lot of controversy, So it's real easy to end up there.
Yeah. And I think another aspect about this, I'm not sure we talked about this last time, but it does beg to be mentioned, of course, is that whenever a game blows up, there will be people looking to emulate, be
Yeah.
inspired, or in some cases, steal it. As we saw, especially when it comes to the mobile space, that
Mobiles.
we've seen a lot of developers who will just shamelessly, and this is again, they'll make it to the point that there is no attempt at trying to make a different game. It's just,
It
here's
seems like it's
Cuphead.
almost accepted. Like it
Yeah.
seems like it's like everybody knows like yeah, every game's a copy. Like it's reached a point where
Hmm.
nobody even talks about mobile plagiarism anymore. It's just like yeah, that's how these games are. It's very wild.
Oh yeah, like there's like several hundred games that all have like the same aesthetic icon of Clash of Clans.
Yeah,
Like it is crazy there, and like
yeah,
that to me, I think that's where it goes a step too far. That
for
if you
sure.
are trying to confuse someone into playing your
Yeah,
game,
yeah.
that's a no-no in my book.
Right. No manipulation, no confusion, no pretending to be something else. Those are definitely no asset theft. So let's all mark those off the list of things you
Hmm.
shouldn't do as a game dev.
And when we talk about games that kind of blow up, like we've said, people will look to that to either make a game similar or to use that as the basis for another project. Again, in the video that I put up, maybe I'll put a link to it in the. I'll put a link to the critical thought in the recorded version. Vampire Survivors right now is blowing up. There are it's I think it's very quickly becoming the next deck building roguelike that I've gotten. I think I've played 4 or 5 different Vampire Survivor likes in the last like 4 weeks. And again, Vampire Survivors isn't even out yet. That's the crazy part. It's still in early access, and people are already trying to make games either similar, better, or inspired by.
Right. Right. I mean, speaking of vampires, you can make you can make your own Vampire the Masquerade. So if you're looking for,
Ooh,
yeah, you can work with that IP now if you
yeah.
want.
And there's now a vampire survival game with that V Rising that we tried. So vampires are coming, I guess, into
They're coming
vogue.
back.
Yeah.
Yeah, back in vogue, man. So we're gonna go vampires. Okay, vampires, and then we're gonna go back to zombies, or
Mm-hmm.
brown shooters, and then zombies again. I'm not sure
There
what
we
it's gonna
go.
be.
And in
I
10.
was thinking before I forget, Josh.
Mhm.
I was thinking we need a name. If we haven't came up with it, we need to have like eras, decades, like about each.
Mhm.
What we name each seasons of the game development. You know, and I mean even like 6 months, 4 months. It was like the you know something like that. I think that'd be a
Yeah.
good one.
That could be our next pet project. Just create the perfect archival system
There we go.
for the game industry. You right? Yeah, exactly, Chris. So in like 10 years from now, we'll all be saying, where are all the deck building roguelikes? Why hasn't someone made a new one of
No, it
those?
hasn't made one in so long.
And right now, I think a few people watching just got like a sharp pain as I said those words.
Vampire Swan Song.
Oh, and when it comes to being inspired, as we said, you have like right off the bat, you have to go above and beyond. And that is oftentimes where I think a lot of games, at least the ones that most people don't hear about, tend to fail on. That yes, you could make your Darkest Dungeon or your Slay the Spire or your Vampire Survivors, but again, if it's not equal, like right off the bat, if you're not even close to what that game is now, it's not going to work. And
You're right.
I hate to be that blunt, but again, this is where the MMO crash happened 20 years ago. I'm sorry, maybe about 15 years ago at this point.
15 years ago. Yeah, we need to write it down, Josh. Yeah, work on
Yeah, and to Chris's comment about I'd like to see a more fun Darkest Dungeon, that again is another really
I,
good
I didn't
point.
have any fun in Darkest Dungeons. Are you supposed to?
Do we have to have a whole discussion about what is fun when it
What
comes
is
to
fun?
there you go, that's
Yeah,
a
that's kind of
3 hour.
poignant because you just wrote an article or a
Yeah.
video I saw about that.
Mm-hmm.
It's true. A game doesn't have to be fun.
Yeah.
There's lots of games that are not fun at all, and we play them. You know what I mean?
Uh,
I don't know
like
how much fun I had playing like what was that, DayZ, or
oh
that was
yeah.
not a fun. I was not having any fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We'll have to add that to the list then, I think. But to Chris's comment, this is one avenue where we see indie developers can work in about saying, let's take a design and let's go in a completely different direction. This is again why Inscription has succeeded so well. That, yes, it's a deck building roguelike, but you cannot say it plays like Slay the Spire or Monster Train or any of those other games. And it
Yeah.
does its own thing. I think more importantly, it carves its own specific niche out of that
Yeah.
genre.
Definitely. Yeah. So carving niches is definitely going to help you get
Mm-hmm.
real important, right? Like, so for sure, if you're going to go into a genre, right? A
Mm-hmm.
genre or type of game, you have to meet the minimum requirements. If you're going after a certain kind of game, you're trying to beat a certain Slay the Spire, or
Mm-hmm.
you're trying to do that, again, you got to meet the minimum requirements. You got to be as good as Slay the Spire and then different in your own way. So it's not a complete copy, right? And it doesn't look the same because nobody wants to play a copy. Nobody wants to play kind of Slay the Spire. They're going to go play the original, right? The first one, the one that created the formula, the one that everybody's trying to copy. So why is everybody trying to copy it? I want to go find out why. I'm going to play the original instead.
Yep, definitely. I'm just, trying to adjust our sounds. I think one of us is a little bit off. There we go.
It's me, probably me.
Yep, and again, nobody is going to want to play your lesser version or even just your similar version to these games. And like, unlike the kind of like Vampire Survivor, like, so one that I've enjoyed the most is what was it, 20 Minutes Till Dawn. And this one's kind of like a Lovecraftian take. And more importantly, I think what it does is, one, it has a different aesthetic, and two, it has a different feel to it by the fact that there's more aiming, there is reloading you have to keep track of. And it's not just saying, here's Vampire Survivors but harder, or here's Vampire Survivors but easier. It's, yes, we're being inspired by it, but we're, off in this direction, while Vampire Survivors is going over here.
Right, like who was saying, like Chris was saying, Darkest Dungeons wasn't fun. Well then, Chris, go make what about Darkest Dungeons, for example, didn't you like, or what wasn't fun? So you would think about, what could I do? What would make it fun for me, right? Because you didn't like it, so clearly there's a deficiency, and if you could solve that and figure that out, then you'd have your own Darkest Dungeons that would be different. But because it's Darkest Dungeons without this thing that's horrible and I didn't like, and that some people don't like, that don't play Darkest Dungeons, right? So that's also what you can do. We were talking about another game. You brought it up yesterday, or last time. It was I forgot a game, but the main tenant, like, you didn't do, like, it didn't happen in the game. So they took out like one of the main tenets of that game. It was like, you don't die in this game or something like that. I can't remember now. But just changing something simple, it'd be like DayZ, but no permadeath, kind of. I don't know, something like that. Just taking things and taking out the pain points of games is always something to look at for inspiration. Get your inspiration, take out your pain points, polish it. That's always a good formula to go with.
And I think, to Chris's question, this, I think, is both a form of both in the challenge of the design of the game as well as how you market and the public perception of it. Like, there's a game that I played this Wednesday called Hunter X. And this is a game that looks very heavily to Bloodstain, the actual Metroidvania, not the modern retro one. And if your game is that close in terms of its look, like if someone, like if yes, it's a different game, but if you put these two games side by side and it's kind of hard to tell which one is which, then you are going to be having those comparisons. And again, something that I've talked about is when you're working in a genre, especially a popular one, you do have to understand what are the conventions of that genre. What did somebody do with their Metroidvania or their Darkest Dungeon? Because that is what the public perceives as part of that genre. Like, going back to the car analogy that I like, it would be like saying, well, all these people put brake pads in their cars. I'm going to leave that out and be, different. I'm going to be the risk taker there. If you build your game in a genre and you do not meet...
Permadeath car.
Yeah, permadeath car. There you go. It's a roguelike car.
Roguelike.
There we go. Someone call a Honda. We have a pitch for them there. But if somebody picks up your game and they see that it is missing those aspects that they feel are essential aspects of another game or something that they really like, they're going to downplay your game because of it. And a lot of that, again, is just the nature of the market. That, again, like with Vampire Survivors, right now, it is kind of the standard of that design. So if you release a game and it is missing or it's lacking in areas that Vampire Survivors is not, your game is going to be dinged for it. And conversely, if there is a problem in Vampire Survivors, and this is something I said in the article, and you include in your game, guess what? People are going to go after you and not Vampire Survivors. Because again, being number one for a design, genre, or concept, it gives you a lot more credibility. It kind of gives your game a shield when it comes
Right.
to issues like that.
Yeah, you kind of got the protection. You were like, well, it was the first one. You know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
you can always say, well, you're taking their design. You got it wrong. You messed it up. You didn't. So yeah, you do have a shield. If you're the first one, you came out. You got the most market share. You have the most. All that stuff's been there before.
Yeah.
Hey, Pony.
Hey, Pony. Yep. And again, like when it comes to the genre itself, this is again why you want to look for carving out those specific areas. But you still need to get the foundational stuff right. This is why we say that when you're going to study a genre or work in it, you gotta play those examples. You gotta play the good, the bad, the
Bad.
ugly, the games that got, 2 reviews on Steam, the games that got 0 reviews on Steam. Because this is how you learn what those games did and did not do right. And obviously, if you're working in a genre, you want to get as much right about it as you can.
Yeah, you don't want to be going into a genre and never played it and not know the main conventions. That would be I couldn't imagine like a developer never playing like a 4X and trying to make one and release
Oh.
it. Like that would be hilarious. Not hilarious. I'm sorry, I take it back. Ernie. But yeah, I mean, definitely know your study your subject and you got to know it. And like, so here's one of the interesting things. Like I mentioned earlier, that IGN video basically mentioned mechanics of the game, right? Aesthetics, I think, was barely mentioned, and I think that's the problem that some people were having. You said
Hmm.
if you compare it side by side and you
Yeah.
can't tell, that then you got a problem. You got to be able to differentiate. This is this game. This is this game. Um, Otherwise you're confusing people. You're trying to make it look like the other game, so they hopefully buy your game and don't know, kind of thing. But I mean, I lost my train of thought there. Sorry.
But I guess while you're thinking about it, yeah, like when you're looking at a mechanic, you can do whatever the heck you want in that space. There's nothing that's stopping you from, saying my game's going to feature a durability system, or I'm going to have, Estus healing, like in Dark Souls. And with Misplace, what's very unusual, I think, in this circumstance is that I want to bring up the Cuphead clone as well in the same regard, is that Misplace looks really damn good. Like, this is not a case of a developer doing it worse, or, the
Right.
off-brand, like Sony and Spony as their title. It looks like a very well executed aesthetic.
Yeah. Yeah, it looks great. Like it looks really good. So it's not honestly, I wanted to see your opinion if you think it looked that similar, because I think while it might be similar, like I don't know, like maybe some of the material like designs or something like that, I don't
Mhm.
think it's that similar. I don't know. Do you think if you put them side by side they're that similar, Josh?
I think like
More like
generic
generic?
screens, like the fields and wandering around. I think
Yeah.
that does look similar, but in the same respect, it's not really. I think as damnable as people are, trying to make it out to
Yeah.
be.
I mean, literally any game made in that vein is going to have an open field. It's going to have grass you can cut, a chest you can open. Those are all tenets of that genre and that type of game. So
Mhm.
it's odd.
Yeah, and again, like uh, whenever we have this discussion, what about pixel art? I
Yeah.
mean, pixel art has been copying Nintendo games now for 20 plus years.
Yeah. I mean, no one's saying about a platformer that comes out, oh, they're just copying Mario. No one has said that in a long time anymore. Again, unless we're wearing we're both plumbers and like we're really, really, almost
Yeah,
taking assets or something. But, no one accuses platformers of that. So it's strange.
yeah. And as an example of where the line gets a little bit more blurry, this was the game. Let me see if I have it. I just had my note here. Here it is. The game Enchanted Portals. This was back in 2019. And this was a game that they did a Kickstarter for it. And it looks, very, very similar to Cuphead. Now, in this respect, it does feature different mechanics and different fights. It's not just here's Cuphead but less. However, it is a game that if you put it side by side, it does not have the same level of polish and kind of like, I guess, like technical depth as say Cuphead did. And again, this is where it gets a little bit harder because they're obviously being inspired by Cuphead, but it feels in some respect not as polished. Whereas with Misplaced, again, just looking at side by side, they nailed it really damn well.
Hmm. It looks like it's ready to looks like it fits on the Switch, or because I think they're going for Switch and they're going for the PlayStation. So it
Mm-hmm.
looks like it's ready to go on there already. So
Mm-hmm. And again, I guess for you, like when you look at something like Enchanted Portals, I guess what do you think about this in terms of like, is this a shameless copy or is this in the more inspired by?
I'm more just as a developer, I'm going to be a little bit biased on it.
Mm-hmm.
I really, unless people are stealing assets or thing like that, I'm going to go. It's more inspired,
Mm-hmm.
for me personally. I mean, because you know, coming up with a brand new aesthetic, or for example, if I made a cell shaded game and something, they would compare it to another cell shaded game. I said, oh, or is this Okami or something? You know what I mean? And
Mm-hmm.
and it's just like a lot of things can be construed when they're just a part of the game development, a part like an aspect of the game, and it doesn't holistically make the entire game up, right? It's only we're taking parts from here, and
Mm-hmm.
again, um, every story's been told before. Every song's been written before. It's basically how you interpret it, how you create it. It's your version of the song, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
the same thing. Let's go with music. If I go and I play, I can't think of a musician, but if I go up to a musician and I play that person's song, but me instead, it's not going to sound as good as the original artist, right? Just like we're talking about with the video games. But if instead I said, okay, I'm going to work on my own theory study and take pieces from everywhere and then develop my own, and then I'll have my own musical vibe or
Mm-hmm.
whatever that I want to get across. And then that's completely different, right? And that's kind of what you want to aim for. You want to be inspired by, I mean, even Pong, like the first Pong, you could say Pong's a ripoff of air hockey or
Mm-hmm.
something, right? I mean, but it's just they were taking a physical idea or something in the world and trying to digitize that into a game, right? I mean, imagine trying to make the first video games, the first mechanics for the first games. I couldn't even imagine like how hard that must have been, like what you're trying to figure out there. You know what I mean? And so
Mm-hmm.
we're in a completely different space now. All these mechanics exist. Reload mechanics exist. Health regen. All these things exist. There are all these tenets that are there and we're aware of. So if an just because other games use them, we can't say that they're um, plagiarizing or this and that. Again, plagiarism is taking assets,
Mm-hmm.
uh, doing exact, aiming for almost the exact art style while changing very little, those type of things. But if you're really going, at least trying to change something, I'm going to say most of the time, 99% of the developers are being inspired by, and they're not trying to copy. We, as a smart developer, you gain nothing from trying to copy a game at all. Like you can, if you're trying to like copy the game, right? I'm not trying to say be inspired by, but if you get nothing from that at all, you're going to get the type of attention that Myspace got, which
Mm-hmm.
probably is going to end up being good for them, in the long run. Attention is going to be attention. If they get on the store, people will know about it. Probably just want to try it just to see, right? If it's any
Mm-hmm.
different. So, but that's not every situation. Your indie game completely different. It's not going to have the same traction. So you release your game, didn't make a lot of changes to it. It releases, everybody to say, that looks like that, and not give it a shot because you didn't change the art. You didn't understand what your inspiration was, and then what inspired you to go to that genre, and then what you want to improve on that. Because we're
Mm-hmm.
trying to improve, we're trying to polish, we're not trying to copy.
Yeah, and again, like I think that's a really good point about you have to look in a different direction because again, a lot of people are going to take your game over the coals if you're just making it to look exactly like somebody else's game.
Big time, big time. And I
They'll
mean, I think they love doing that too. It seems like they enjoy it.
they'll rake you over the coals even if it's not even inspired. We've seen people who say, "Oh, this game features jumping, so you're ripping off Mario," or this game has a punch button, so you're just ripping off Final Fight. And or the whole we'll track it somehow it will all equate to Half-Life 3.
Half-Life 3.
And yeah, like taking and going in a different direction is where you really want to go when it comes to being inspired. Like again, with the Enchanted Portals, like it does look like it features original boss designs, and that's good. But again, if you are copying a style or if you're copying an aesthetic, you have to do it differently. If it's just, again, if someone looks at your game and says, hey, this looks exactly like Cuphead, you're going to have to do something different. You have to prove to people that there's more to it. And this is, again, why, like we say, that you want to be really careful about being very close to another genre or another popular game.
Yeah, and so like when you're saying good point, like being close to a genre, how do you want to get close to that genre, right? It's like, do you want to get close to the genre by looking exactly the same? Do you want to get close to the genre by maybe copying the combat? Or like, I mean, you don't want you don't want to jump up there and just again copy it. So it just depends how close you get to the genre and how you want to feel about it. I'm actually looking at some Enchanted Portal uh, art right now, and I can definitely see how people would want to say that's pretty close to. But again, it's just inspired by. It's just someone. It's the same thing as people started making pixel art, and this is the same thing. Hand drawn art games. Someone's going to make a hand drawn art fighting game soon. Someone's going to make a hand drawn art point and click adventure game. I mean, they're going to keep doing that. Once someone's seen success with it and that it works, it's hard. It's a very hard style to do. You need very talented artists like Cuphead. We're talking about the fidelity of that compared to this. I mean, that's massive.
Yep, and again, like that's why you have to be really careful. Nobody's saying you can make a game like Cuphead, but if you make your game that looks worse than Cuphead, that is really just taking a arrow to the knee
for your
man. Game, right then and there.
For sure.
And like we've said, like you cannot copyright mechanics and systems, but if you are basing your aesthetic off of another game and you are not doing enough to make it stand out, then you're in trouble. And people are talking about like the paper cutout aesthetic, and a good example of this would be the game Bug Fables. Bug Fables is a RPG that is very heavily inspired by Paper Mario, and again that whole like paper style aesthetic. And on one hand, it's not as good fidelity-wise as Nintendo.
Not even
right then and there.
But not even close.
The gameplay does feel different. It has different systems. It has a little bit more involvement with the kind of like button press or action command system that was in like a Super Mario RPG or a Paper Mario. So, yes, it is heavily inspired by Paper Mario. But if Paper Mario goes over here, Bug Fables maybe goes like over there. Like it does things that are different. And again, like we look at like the Darkest Dungeon clones, that a lot of them just kept to the same basic tone and aesthetic. We're going to make it about Lovecraft, or it's going to be about monsters, and it's not doing enough to stand out.
Right. Because that's just a part of Darkest Dungeons, right? That's just a little bit. Yeah, it's dark and it's a dungeon. But there's way more to the game than that. And so if all you're taking away is that it's a dark dungeon, so let's make it let's do darks and blacks and reds and then cards. And I'm done. You haven't figured it out. You need to do more research.
And Pony's example earlier about every game that wants to include a stamina bar and then call it a Souls-like. That's not how it works. That's just, again, one part of that mechanic or that equation. And it's why we talk about the importance of studying these designs, understanding what these systems do. Because if you include, let's say, A, B, and D, and you forget system or mechanic C, guess what? That could have been a major point about why people play those games. Now,
Yeah.
if you market your game and say, hey, we're just like this, but we don't do that, that's a different story. But
Right.
again,
Then you
that's
get
a.
the ones who don't like that one part and they say, well, I'm going to give it a try because of that. So
Mm-hmm.
easy sell like that. And so that's really good. Differentiating yourself, getting a niche,
Mm-hmm.
really important things to keep in mind.
Yeah, and like this is something I talk about when it comes to the third generation mobile games. That in the current generation, the developer strategy is not to say let's just copy Clash of Clans or Candy Crush Saga. It's where can we make our own mark, and this is where we get games like Azure Lane, like Ark Knights, Genshin Impact, and
Good
so
shit.
on. And again, like Genshin Impact is another really good example of this conversation because
For sure. I'm surprised it didn't come up earlier,
yeah,
Genshin Impact. What are your thoughts on that?
that is a tricky one
It's real
because
tricky. Well,
it is very inspired by, of course, Breath of the Wild.
wild. Yeah.
But it does do things differently beyond just
It's
the gotcha
anime.
monetization. Yeah.
It gotcha and it's anime. I mean, that's
Hmm.
almost enough. And and you can play on mobile. It's amazing. Like technically that you can play on like a mobile and it looks that good is wild to me. Um but yeah, I mean, it does. I think it differentiates itself enough. The combat's not quite the same.
Hmm.
A lot of little different things. You know what I mean? And I think that's enough.
Yeah. There was this game. Oh, I can't let I forget the name of it that I played. That's very similar to that Grindstone game. The one that was like the Apple Arcade one, where you're like moving the character around.
Mm-hmm.
Alchemy Stars. That's it.
Alchemy Stars. Mm-hmm.
And again, in these cases, these are developers taking systems, and of course, in some cases, the general aesthetic, but going in their own different direction. Again, Genshin Impact doesn't have durability in their games. It is designed, again, for a lot more late game and, the kind of endless content of live service than you would ever see come from Nintendo with Breath of the Wild. And I think, again, like, it's important to bring up, the technical spectacle of the fact that this is a mobile game that looks this fantastic or looks this high quality. Because, again, as we've said, aesthetics do matter. If you can
Big
make a
time.
game, and I think this is, again, why a lot of people are really pointing to Misplaced, that
Yeah.
it looks like Link's Awakening, that the DX or DS, no, DX remaster. And that's not that's not a negative for me. That's not a complaint. That's a
No.
how the heck did they nail it with a two-person team?
Super, yeah, I'm blown away. And when I finally looked up the studio and I found out there were two people, I was like, wow.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like we were saying with the technology today. I mean, you can get so much done. And it's like one person, you can get so much work done. Two, it's not double the work, it's exponential, right? And you get three. Let's just stop about there. But your work, which you, the capacity, the amount you're able to do with just two people or just three is amazing now with our
Mm-hmm.
current technology. Just
Yeah.
as a side note.
And before I forget my point, like return to the MMO genre for a second, as we were talking about, with if your game does X, Y, and Z, and my game does X, L, and Z, and you market it right, that's how some of the majors, how some of the non-World Warcraft MMOs survived a lot longer. They went in a different direction. They said,
Yeah,
okay, if World of Warcraft does this, let's not do that. Let's market our game to people who don't want that. And that's how we got
exactly.
games like City of Heroes and Star Trek Online. And even in the case like Dungeon.
Lotro.
Yeah, Lord of the Rings Online, Dungeons and
Mhm.
Dragons Online, lots of online that came out at that
All the
time.
online.
Hmm. And
14, Final Fantasy 14,
hmm
11. 11, what came out at about the same time or a year after World of Warcraft, completely different, two different ideas of MMOs because it was kind of like the Evercraft idea
hmm
and then WoW's idea. So WoW took like the Evercraft or the older,
I think you may
right,
be confusing names. It's EverQuest. You may be
EverQuest.
confusing
What did,
HeroCraft and
what
EverQuest.
did I say?
Evercraft.
Wow, man. That's a new one.
There we go. Yeah, and again, like Final Fantasy XIV is now like arguably the most popular MMOG on the market. Now, again,
Yeah.
MMOs today is not the same as MMOs 15 years ago, but it's still
Oh.
a very, high watermark or banner for them to hold. And again, like people hated the original Final Fantasy XIV. Like
Oh, bad.
my friend Ken, I think he once did I think I've said this before. He did like a college dissertation on how much he hated that game, and like he used it for like his class on game design about how much I hate
Find
this.
me a copy of that. I'd
Yeah.
love to see that. I was actually in the like alpha beta of that
Yeah.
for the Final Fantasy 14. It was an amazing nightmare, and
Mhm.
it is amazing how much they were able to turn that around. And definitely something to study on how to turn a game around.
Yeah.
Uh,
I
so
almost
definitely classic.
almost forgot Guild Wars. I mean,
Guild
Guild
Wars.
Wars is another game that they just said, you know what, we're not going even anywhere in the same hemisphere as World of Warcraft,
Right, right.
and it worked. And
To this day, it still works.
yeah, and this is again where being inspired really does work. It's about looking at where another developer either didn't capitalize or that they left some, meat on the bone that you
Or a
can
pain
go,
point.
yep. Because that's all, oftentimes that's all it takes. That if you can figure out that, like, what if we do Darkest Dungeon, but let's say replace it with, I don't know, puppy dogs? Or if we
Right,
do mechs, and it's all about
right,
customizable mechs in a
right.
Lovecraft setting, well, we got an idea there. And again, it doesn't take. I think another big point, when we talk about ideas, it doesn't take a lot to go in a different direction. But
Right.
execution, obviously, is a very big point. Again, this is why you have to study these games. Because, again, if
Right.
your only lesson from Darkest Dungeon is that it has Wayne June, it's hard, and it's dark, you're not really going to be able to do much more with that.
That's right. And so for the mech game, for example, we could take it, okay, we're doing mechs. It's bright, colorful.
Hmm.
Let's see, instead of hard, it's medium, or you can adjust it or whatever. It's not so masochistic, you know what I mean? And just slightly change it a little bit, and boom, you have a different one. And now you have a niche. It's like casual hardcore mech
Hmm.
card game, right? So anime.
Yep, and Chris's comment, I have not heard of Legends of Area, but again, like when it comes to games that are the spiritual successor, if your game is not equal or better than that first game, it is going to get heavily dinged for it.
Hmm. And
Um,
it's not an actual spiritual successor.
yeah, like here's another example of a game that I really like, Dyson Sphere Program,
Yeah.
which is heavily inspired, of course, by Factorio. But where Factorio focuses a lot more on kind of like the micro layer, Dyson
Super
Sphere,
micro.
yeah, went kind of like more macro with planet organization.
Hmm.
I mean, heck, we could say it's very similar to something like a Planetary Annihilation. That
Hmm.
it's more about the galaxy universal scale
Yeah.
rather than just one single planet. And
I remember when I was playing Factorio when it first came out,
mhm,
and I was playing like one of the original demos, and in my head I was imagining, just imagine if like the game kept
yep.
zooming out, and we could just keep growing. So that in my head is how I would take it if I would have taken it. So planet, and stuff like that.
Hmm.
So
And there was a
yeah, it just takes
game.
a little bit to change it. Sorry.
Yeah, and like the game we played, Final Upgrade, which is kind of like, what if we take Factorio and make it even more complicated? And in that one,
Not hard enough, right? Dark Souls isn't hard enough. Imagine that.
yeah,
Someone comes up with another one harder than Dark Souls.
Darker
Wow, yeah.
Souls,
Darker
and
Souls.
then the sequel, Darkest Souls, and we just keep going. But one of the problems with Final Upgrade, and this gets back to what we were talking about with studying design, is that you have to look at how onboarding and presentation matter. Because if you say your game is harder, but it's more annoying to play, it's more cumbersome to play, then even the stuff that you did right is going to be eclipsed by what you did wrong.
Oh, that's right.
And
That's
again,
right.
like that's why Dyson Sphere I think really blew up. That in many ways its opening is a lot easier to get into than Factorio. It's not as deep as Factorio, obviously. But again, that's how they can actually pitch it. That if Factorio is your super grognard, you know, very technical, very micro focus, we're going over here. So that if you want that Factorio experience, but you want in this different take, an easier take, here you go. Auction not included versus Dwarf Fortress. Dwarf
Right.
Fortress is the billion-pound gorilla of the colony sim genre. Auction not included is nowhere near as deep, but they go in a completely different direction with how, heat, how temperature and liquid physics affect everything.
All right. Right. And ooh, I lost my point there. Second time today.
And while you're thinking of that, I'm just going to look at keep up with chat here.
Maybe chat will remind me.
Let's
Put it down.
see.
That's right. It's right, Raponi. It's okay to just play a game, put it down. No reason with that. I think that's good. I
Mhm.
always advocate for short games, really
Yeah.
sweet experiences. Always a good thing.
And I think, like, as a very interesting tangent, what we've kind of seen the mobile side embrace is let's take those games that can be put down and let's make them infinite. Because I think that's what we
Right.
saw with, Azure, Arknight, Dragon Ball, Path of Exile as well, and
Path of
so on.
Exile. Oh, I remember my point
Mhm.
now. We're talking about, so like, for example, Subnautica. Like
Mhm.
by
Well,
removing, so check it out. The developers, I was
mhm.
listening to them, and there's not really a lot of combat in the game. And they originally had combat when they were designing it, but was
Mhm.
swimming around, you're just shooting animals. That's not cool. So they removed the combat, and instead, by removing something and changing something, it installed fear and like psychological
Mhm.
like feelings, right? Because you're defenseless, right? I think there's a few weapons later on that you can get, but they're not very effective. For the most of the game, you're not really like, there's not combat. So you're swimming down in the ocean, so you have like psychological effects and stuff like that. But removing the combat, for example, totally changed that whole game, right? So you can do the same thing, right? Like take something out. Okay, well, how about this? We take out one thing and then it changes the whole game. So always think about that too when you're designing your game. You can always maybe take something out, see if it works, or see how it changes when you're studying those games.
Mhm. And another thing we didn't mention yet, which I'm surprised when it comes to inspiration, is horror. The horror
Oh yeah,
genre
yeah.
is kind of the Ouroboros that keep the snake eating itself in terms of, you know, keep kind of going to those same wells. And we just played that game,
Yeah.
Nightmare of Decay, which is just basically a greatest hits collection of Silent Hill, Resident Evil, and several other horror game mechanics.
I think this will be like the third podcast that I say I never would want to make a horror game because I
Hmm.
cannot imagine how you could come up with something unique, something that
Hmm.
wouldn't be a ripoff or considered like where do you go? That's really hard. And again, also the thing about it is once it's been streamed and once it's been seen, the thing's kind of spoiled, right? So that's a real hard. You have to have a lot of interactivity, maybe like a Resident Evil type game with
Hmm.
action and a little bit of horror, but straight up horror. Yeah, that is such a hard deal to,
Yeah.
to change and be unique about it. Like, how do you say, oh, well, you're going to be scared, but just a little bit different? You know what I mean? They're going to scream at you just a different tempo. It's hard
That
to.
very slight different soundbite of the yell when they get scared. And yeah, like the horror genre is another very interesting point. Somebody remind me, I want to rant about adventure games in a few minutes as well. But with the horror genre in particular, the problem that we see is that because everyone is kind of, again, copying from that same well, it becomes harder for these games to stand out. The game, what was it, Puppy's Playtime, that now I'm hearing all kinds of like nasty things about developers as well, is another big example. It looks very similar to Five Nights at Freddy's. It has that same kind of aesthetic tone to it. Again, mechanically, it's night and day between the two. But the problem, again, is that if you're trying to, ape somebody else's success like that, what was it? Oh no, Bendy and the Ink Machine is another example of that. That it kind of, again, comes off as being disingenuous in a way when you're going that far. And yeah, to Pony's comment about Hat in Time, that's a really, I mentioned that example in my horror book about finding horror in horrorless games. And
Yeah.
you do have to, again, like, that's a great example of going in a different direction. And
Yeah.
one of the things that we see, I think, some horror developers do, and this is a big point about the whole Drex collection and the Haunted PlayStation 1 demo disc.
No players online.
Hmm,
Did you play that one? It was
no.
yeah, it's like a shooter and you're playing a shooter but nobody's like in the game. So you're like waiting for people to log on and it's like creepy and 90s.
Hmm,
Really neat idea. It's horror without horror. You know what I mean?
mm-hmm. Interesting. And one thing that we see again from the Haunted and Dread X is trying to experiment and see if there is a market for it. The Sucker for Love, the Lovecraftian dating visual novel game that we played, that all came from the game jam that they did for the Dread X collection. And again, this is where inspiration gets very tricky. And before I go into that, Draken, have a good night as well, and happy birthday again. I think you may be frozen again, Josh. Oh wait, no, you're
Did I
good.
freeze?
No, you're good.
Okay.
It's hard to tell sometimes with some of these, with either lag or the other. But with the Drex collection, with these kinds of horror games, being able to experiment and check this out, because again, one of the reasons why we see developers be inspired in a lot of cases is the very fact that it's about risk mitigation. If you know everyone loves, you know, Zelda or they love Breath of the Wild, well, we have an idea that, let's say, we can capture some of that market. But the downside, of course, is that if you copy it too much, then you're just, trying to steal that market. And in a lot of
Right.
cases, that doesn't work.
Right. And I think what it really comes down to, though, like we've said this before over and over again. I don't know if I'm repeating myself, but art, style, the aesthetics of the game is the most important thing. So if you have similar aesthetics to the other another game, like you better come with a lot more to back it up, or don't go that way at all. Because again, you have to be at the same quality if you're going to use those type of aesthetics, because people will call you out, right? People know what every asset looks like now. We have very educated gamers that are aware of everything's out there. So like copying aesthetics is something you shouldn't really be aiming to do, right? Like we want good art style, but don't copy another game's art, other aesthetic. Understand what's most important of the game, mechanics, things like that. Art is only a fraction of it, but it is highly important. But it's also individual to each game, right? The
Mm-hmm.
art style will really help separate your game, and it will take all criticism away. If it looks exactly like another game, plays completely different, people will say it's still the same game. If it
Yep.
looks completely different but plays exactly like that game, people are going to people will say something different, right? If it plays well and it looks different, people will give it more chances and it'll be something different, make its own kind of niche, right? So,
Mm-hmm. And I'm very surprised that the chat has not brought up the example of Hollow Knight and all the Hollow Knight lights. The
no
Hollow
Hollow
Knight
Knights.
likes. There we
Like,
go. And yet, like as we've said again, there's a reason why aesthetics matter. Because aesthetics set the emotion or the tone for your game. And if you copy aesthetics, people are going to come after you very hard for it, because again, it gets into that kind of, I guess, like the emotion of
yeah.
that kind of game. But
Yeah, because the art style of a game is really like the vibe, the like everything, the way it smells, the way it tastes. It's all about the game. And if you're copying that, I mean, if you're taking from it, you're literally taking the essence of that, that essence
mhm,
of that art of that game, right?
yep,
And instead of devising your own. And again, if you're going to go that route, it's one or the other. It can't be aesthetics and the game. It's one or the other, right? Or none of them.
yeah.
Something different.
And like we just played that game Haku, which is
Yeah,
very similar to Hollow Knight. And
right.
again, we could even talk about games like Ori. Ori is
Story.
also very similar, but again, they have different aesthetics. They have different
Yeah.
feels to them that you can
You,
separate.
yeah, you like I would never even say Haku looks like any, you know what I mean? It's so different because of the art and this its style and its vibe in it. So have you played it? How you feel about it?
About Haku.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we finished that one. I gotta get the video up on the other channel. I thought it was all right. I
Mhm.
don't think again it hits as high as Hollow Knight, and
Right.
again that's where it gets very tricky. That is it a successful game in terms of the market? I don't know at this point. I should have to look this up. How
Yeah.
many people
But I
have
bet you,
reviewed it?
but I bet you it's doing better because of the aesthetics,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the aesthetics, and then the at least decent gameplay, right? It wasn't terrible. It's okay.
Mm-hmm.
It probably didn't really go anywhere and push any boundaries, but it was just good, right? And
Mm-hmm.
if you have it again with its art style separating it, it's allowed, it can have a kind of a pass.
Yeah. So Hollow Knight sits at just shy of 200,000 lifetime reviews, and Haiku is sitting at 562. So not
Man,
exactly
that's
close.
not close at all. Wow, I thought it was. I thought it'd be doing a lot better actually. A little
Mm-hmm.
surprised.
And again, you have to be aware when you are copying or mirroring another style like this. The Loop Hero and then the game that was inspired very heavily by that art is another big point. I think again it really gets at that idea of when you copy aesthetics, that feels like a greater sin than copying
Yeah,
mechanics.
that's a big
Loop
sin.
Hero and what did they switch the name to? I think it was what Stuck in Time, Lost in Time.
Stuck in time, lost in time. One of
Here it is,
those.
Stuck in Time.
Yeah, stuck in
That
time.
Stuck in Time plays nothing like Loop Hero, but it borrows so much from that aesthetic that it did rub people the wrong way. And again, I think this is where I think we can maybe draw that line that if your aesthetic is so close that people think it came from that developer,
Developer, yeah,
that is when I think you may have to step back in that
for sure,
regard.
for sure, for sure. I think that's that. Yeah, that is definitely the main point. As I'm looking at my place, so MySpace, so I mean, God, I feel like it's just um again like the generic shots and stuff like that. But I think if you gave it more of a look, but that doesn't matter because people aren't going to give it more of a look, right? They're just going to see those few pictures and that's it. And
Yeah.
so, even if there's more to it, even if there's more depth, right? You could scream, so you make the copy and you could scream to the world, but it's completely different. All the mechanics are different. It just looks the same. Well, everybody's gonna say, yeah, it looks the same.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I think returning back to Misplaced, that again is where we have that issue that yes, they could do things entirely different mechanic wise. I'm certainly not writing the game off. But when someone looks at that footage and they think, oh, it's a new Zelda game, and you say,
You
no,
know,
no,
the
it's a completely different game, they're like, wait, what?
IGN has to issue a statement. This is not a new Zelda game, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah. Let's see. Hmm. And to WRF, let's see, Returnal. And if you create your own take on a game, if you can do enough to differentiate itself, that can certainly help. And like we said, like aesthetics, I think is definitely where you need to be the most mindful of.
yeah,
Nobody
yeah,
cares if you take the Estes system from
yeah.
Dark Souls, or you want to build your action game like Devil May Cry,
Or
or
your
like we saw
skill
with
tree.
Neo.
No one cares about skill tree. You do
Yeah.
skill tree, you break the barrels, loot comes out. No one cares. All that's cool. Fine game. But yeah, again, if the pipe looks like it's from Mario, or if the tree looks like it's from what's that? Firewatch or something,
Mm-hmm.
people will know and people get really mad. And because it's just brings up the whole ugliness of like as a developer,
Mm-hmm.
why are you stealing like that? What's your point, right? So instead of like being a game developer, I think people switch instead and think you're just trying to take and swindle people, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's the thing to keep in mind that okay, yeah, maybe you're going for a similar aspect, but people are going to construe that as like marketing and swindling, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just look on the mobile space. That's all like just a giant swindle going on at all
Mm-hmm.
times. And so we have to, you have to be aware of that when you're designing it. Sure, go for the aesthetics if you want, but again, you got to change a lot of other things. You got to have all the other quality, be inspired, from other things, you know, from the
Yep.
mechanics. All those other things are there and free for you to use.
Yep, and like we've said, if you want to work on your inspired game on your own, or as a pet project, something to go on itch, nothing is stopping you. If you want to make the umpteenth Mario like or Hollow Knight like, and so
Hmm.
on. But if
Hmm.
you're trying to build a commercial product, you again have to answer a very simple question: what makes your game stand out?
Yeah.
Why should I play it?
Yeah.
And this was something I talked about in the last piece about Monster Train Slay the Spire. I think Monster Train is superior to Slay the Spire. I think it's a far better game. But it's not the first game.
I'm
And
gonna try
again,
that.
that first game is very different. A simple question. Or, no, the next question: will Josh Blazer break the game? That's the next thing you have to ask. And again, if you don't do enough to stand out, you're not going to be able to capture that market. And there's another major point that I want to say here, and this is something that I've been saying a lot lately. There's a difference between a market for a genre and a market for a game. And this is what you have to really understand. Just because, let's say 5 million people play Vampire Survivors. Again, I'm just throwing that number out there. That's probably not right. That doesn't mean that the market of Vampire Survivor likes is 5 million strong.
Yeah.
Just like
Yeah.
World of Warcraft pulling 14, 15, 20 million subscribers doesn't mean there's 20 million MMOG fans.
Right, and if you like logically think about it, it probably means that it's like the exact opposite. That there's like way less for you to grab from there because they got it already. They were first. They've been doing it. They have people that are sold. They pay monthly. They you
Mm-hmm.
know, so it's yeah,
Mm-hmm. And this is why you have to be really careful when you are looking at these genres. And of course, this is also why, from a development standpoint, you don't want to be spending more money or put more development into a game that's already been established or to a genre like
right,
that. Because if you
right.
think, oh, I'm just going to spend, $10 million more than World of Warcraft, and surely my game will do, 10% better, it's not going to happen.
It's been attempted several times and it doesn't
Several,
not
it's like a
work.
whole lot of
The
times.
whole lot.
Yeah.
It's
And
literally never worked.
and again, the MMOs that survive, they went in a different direction. Just
Yeah.
like how if you're going to build a platformer, you have to. Ah, damn, Chris, I don't have my flying machine as set up yet. I someone invent me a teleporter and we can solve that. But again, if you want to build a game that goes in a different direction, you can certainly do that. But you always, and again, like as we said, if aesthetics are the aspect that you must stand out from, mechanics are where you have to nail it. That you have to make sure that your game works. That
Right.
if your Vampire Survivor like plays worse than Vampire Survivors, nothing else is going to matter. Your game is not going to work like that. And again, like one before I forget, because I had this thought before and I forgot it. Neo versus Dark Souls. Neo is heavily inspired by a Souls-like. Again, it was their take on it,
Hmm.
but they did it differently. They
Yeah.
have the action RPG loot system, and again,
Yeah.
love it or hate that system, it is a unique selling point that Dark Souls obviously doesn't have. Remnant from the Ashes, first person or third person shooter Souls like. It's
Yeah.
something, again, Dark Souls doesn't have. Gunfire Reborn, that game that we only played once or twice and never 30, 50 times here on the channel. It
Yeah, I was
is
like, no,
a
you play that all the time.
yeah, it is a looter shooter like Borderlands, but we can certainly spend an hour breaking down how it's different and what it does differently from it.
Gunfire. I need to jump on one of these nights to play with
Mm-hmm.
y'all. I see it. I mean, so that looks so fun.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. I have an Anthem Fun System.
Elden Ring
Pete.
barely works, but I had fun. That's right.
There we go, Pony. There's our new project. Let's make a pizza teleporter. But did you have a point before I interrupted you?
Um, let's see here. I think we basically covered everything. You know what I mean? Like aesthetics, aesthetics number one. Oh yeah. So we were getting into the mechanics
Hmm.
when you're choosing. Okay, so genres again. Genres is completely different than the game. We
Hmm.
need to keep that separate. Remember that. Don't go thinking that you're going to make the next Darkest Dungeon. Don't go thinking you're going to make the next. It's not
Hmm.
going to happen. If you decide you want to go that way, you want to be inspired, whatever this and that, okay, that's fine. Aesthetics, number one, is what you need to be concerned about. You need to be aware of, right?
Hmm.
If how can you go your own way? You should probably go your own way in your art style. It needs to look good, and change it, do something different, right? If you are copying an art style, you need to be aware that you're going to get a lot of attention for it, right?
Hmm.
In probably bad ways. And then your mechanics would still need to be good and all that. Not recommended. So again, so when we're talking about this, like what when you're looking at a game that you want to be inspired by, study the mechanics really hard, study the genre really hard, figure out what the game got right, figure out what it got wrong. Um, Study the bad ones, study the good ones, look for the pain points and see what you can change, right? I mean, that's pretty much all I got to say there. I think we've covered everything.
Yeah. And I think the final example I want to talk about very quickly is the adventure game genre. And I still need to
Oh
get in
yeah, yeah,
touch
yeah.
with Dave Gilbert again. That the adventure genre has definitely had its growing pains in this respect. And this is again the challenge of being inspired or building in a very, I think, very foundational or very set in its way genre. That if you go too far outside of it, you may actually leave the market that you were intending to
Yeah,
hit. And
right.
again, this is a very tough point. I think it's again why the horror genre has really kind of found a niche with short form horror. That they can experiment any which way they can. They can build a 15-minute long horror game. They
Yeah.
can build a 8 to 10-hour long horror game. But with the adventure genre, from what I've seen, we haven't had the adventure genre equivalent of Hollow Knight or of a Five Nights at Freddy's or even of a Disco Elysium. And that's kind of like funny. Like Disco Elysium is a choose your own adventure game come to life.
I think that adventure game designers or people, they're really stuck in the constraints of it and they can't
Mm-hmm.
see how to expand because again, when you leave it, you're going to leave the genre, right? So all the
Mm-hmm.
tenets that are there, how can you expand and go from it, right?
At,
That's a hard cookie to crack.
yeah, at what point is your game no longer an adventure game?
Right.
Just like at
Right.
what point is your game not a horror game or your game's not a Souls like?
Right.
And it is very tough. And to return to horror again, Tormented Souls that came out last year, that is unapologetically, taken from Resident Evil. You're in a giant mansion. There's a lot of keys. It's fixed camera perspectives, and it worked because it felt like going back to that older time of a survival horror. But that only works if nobody else is making a game exactly like that. If every other developer was making an isometric Resident Evil style game using Unreal Engine 4 at the time, your game's not going to stand out.
Yeah. Uh Phony, they were saying, wasn't there like a small adventure game resurgence that was happening, uh, 5 years ago,
Yeah,
somewhere around
again,
there?
like
Yeah,
Watchet Eye, Dave Gilbert,
yeah.
Lamp City,
But
like.
again, it was like it was just like you were playing the same games from then. There was literally nothing changed, and so I was like, I should like these, right? And I was
Mhm.
playing them, and I'm like, this is the same thing. Nothing's been innovated, nothing's been changed. So it's like only if you like that formula never changing would you like that game, right?
And here's the
Like
big one, and Pony just beat me to it. There's a Monkey Island
Tony.
reboot coming out by the original developers. It's been in secret for like the last few years. And
Wow.
I don't know. Again, like they're doing a completely different art style, and that again is that question of, again, aesthetic is a lot of the emotion of these games. I honestly don't know how Monkey Island is going to do because I can see it going two ways. It could be a success because it is Monkey Island, or it could be a failure because it's not Monkey Island
Monkey
enough.
Island. Yeah, yeah, definitely.
And it
Definitely.
again, it's very hard when it comes to these kinds of foundational genres like that. And yeah, like the whole adventure game, like kind of the resurgence was more like not exactly a bang, it was more like a whimper. And again,
Very
like
whimper.
I
Yeah.
know, if I say anything bad about adventure games here, that there are going to be a lot of fans of Wadget Eye who are going to come after me. But again, it's that situation of how many people
There's
played
like two people,
Wadget
Josh.
Eye. Oh, now I'm really going to get attacked for that. Like, how many people played Wadget Eye game, and how many people played Darkest Dungeon or played Subnautica? And the reason why I say this is that these are genres that have blown up. That they have that mainstream appeal. I just don't know if the adventure genre is at that same level.
Yeah. No, I don't think so. And I want to see, like, I'd love to see it. I'd love to see a re-adventure. Everybody in chat's like they would love to see it. I think it's a lot of rose-tinted glasses that we all have, and I think probably we could never go home again.
Mm-hmm.
In adventure games, sadly, I feel that way. But prove me wrong, guys. Come on, some good developers out there making me an adventure game that I'll actually enjoy and play.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
And again, like here's my final question. I'll leave this to the chat as well. That if somebody makes a mainstream adventure game, one that does blow up like Disco Elysium or like Darkest Dungeon, would it even be considered an adventure game? Like, would it be a game that would be so different that all the
Yeah.
old school players would be like, no, this is not my adventure game. I don't want to
Yeah.
play this. But again, just like with Elden Ring, there's 15 million people plus at this point who bought Elden Ring. So the uh, old fuddy duddies, or that old those old terms, doesn't really apply here.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I guess like it's 50-50, right? We're gonna say
Mm-hmm.
it's not gonna be enough or it changed too much. So
Mm-hmm. Yep. And to Mr. Game in Chat, thanks for coming on as we're wrapping things up. Like again, like to kind of summarize our points that you can be inspired by popular games, but you have to chart your own path. You need to figure out what you can do differently, better, or in a completely unique direction. And
things you didn't like,
mhm.
change them. How can you make it better? Um,
Can you create a different tone? Can you do a different aesthetic with it?
Different atmosphere.
Hmm.
Audio, change the audio completely different. If the game has really dark death metal, do orchestra or something like that, right?
We need a Doom Eternal with smooth jazz. There we go. Someone invent
Bro,
that.
bro, yeah.
There's my $1 million idea to pitch all the developers watching. I want smooth jazz Doom Eternal. Go.
Yeah, maybe my next after Samurai Pig and Rooster, I'll get on that.
There we go.
That
Uh,
reminds me, Jazz Punk. Do you remember Jazz Punk,
yeah.
Josh?
Oh yes. Let's see. Are the first like the Oddworld games? I always put them in kind of like a platformer adventure
Yeah,
or adventure
platformer
platformer or
adventure,
something like
adventure
that. Doom
platformer. Yeah,
Eternal. There you
dude,
go.
Eternal.
Yeah, you have, and again, if you want to be inspired by another game and work on it as a mod or as a pet project, nothing's stopping you. If you want to make Pokemon Chartreuse, you can do that. But again, if you are trying to make a commercial product, if you are trying to make something that you intend to sell, you have to have a unique selling point. You cannot just say, I'm Darkest Dungeon, but I'm also, I may just have it slightly brighter or slightly
Right.
darker.
Right, and remember, like I think before I forget, remember one of the key things about your game is you need to be able to elevator pitch it, right? So
Mm-hmm.
always when you're working on it, when you're doing it, it's like you can't just say, "Yeah, bro, it's Darkest Dungeon and it's even darker." And okay, you got to say it's dark or it's like Darkest Dungeon, but now mechs and anime, and it features both Joshes and. So it's something like that. You really got to differentiate it. So be able to get your game. Always make sure that you can pitch it in an elevator, right? And that which you're pinching it, it doesn't sound the same. and it sounds unique. And so that's one of the key things that I want to make sure you remember that, because we're taking information from other games. So when you're doing that's to help you like keep it in your head,
Mm-hmm.
always have that couple sentences about your game. And if it doesn't sound interesting or different or enough, work on that.
Yeah. And I'm not sure if Pony's being sarcastic or not, but there is turn-based Doom. People have done that.
Yeah,
And
turn-based Doom.
yep.
Mega Man, Mega Man in Doom.
Oh yeah. Again, I played that Metroidvania Doom, Vomitorium.
Robotorium, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And before I forget, we were talking about being inspired by games. Curse of the Dead Gods and Hades. Curse of the Dead Gods is a very. I hope I'm getting it right. I always flub the name slightly. Let me see. Curse of the. Yeah, I was right. Yay for me. But yeah, like Curse of the Dead Gods is very similar to Hades in terms of its look, and I think that may have actually hurt a little bit. But it features very different mechanics. They went in a different direction in terms of the combat system. But I think again, like to get back to the point,
91% though. It has a 91% rating on GOG.
oh, that's good.
We're just something right.
But again, I think to get back to this point, that aesthetics,
It's just like Hades, bro.
yeah, that's the
It looks
problem.
just like Hades.
That it's harder to sell mechanics, I think, differently than it is aesthetics. Again, is why we harp on the art style, the graphics, and the aesthetics of your game. You show someone 20 seconds of Curse of the Dead Gods, and you show 20 seconds of Hades, they may have a little bit of trouble differentiating the two. But we play the two, and it's again like there's between like a motorcycle and a car. They're both forms of transportation. One is obviously very differently designed than the other.
Right.
Yep, to Z's comment, you can make anything interesting. Good marketing certainly helps. I'm sure someone must have done first-person Tetris by now. I can't imagine that hasn't been an idea.
Yeah, I think I've seen it once, and I've thought about it multiple times. Like, how was I going to do it? I've even thought about doing it in VR. I'm sure there's a VR Tetris.
I'm sure that could be like a horror to play when you're watching like all the blocks slowly coming down.
Yeah, horror Tetris. There you go.
See, there's another $1 million idea we had on this stream.
We came up with 3 today, so you keep watching, devs. We're gonna have so many ideas for you.
But I think Tetris Effect is in VR. Oh, that's nice.
I had another point and I lost it, Josh. It was a good one. Next time.
All right. I'm trying to think if there's anything else to. I think we've covered everything. We gave a kind of our synopsis.
Give our synopsis. Mechanics. Art is very. Oh, yeah. Okay, so I know. One of the sad things is, as we were talking about, art. Always remember in your game that art is sadly one of the most important things in your game. The aesthetics, consistency, everything else has to be good, right? We're not talking about that. We're talking about when game people are looking at your game, because that's the whole reason we're talking about this, right? Is that this one game looked too similar to another game, and it causes a huge controversy. Devs want that, right? So your art, make sure when you're presenting it itself, it's the best it can be. It's differentiated as much as it can be, and put as much as you can be in. It's sad to say, but your game depends a lot on the quality of your art. And so always something to keep in mind. Aesthetics and consistency. When you're taking inspiration from games, study the mechanics, what mechanics are good, what you liked about it, what was good about it. Pour over that genre, play the bad ones, play the good ones, play the mediocre ones, and then get your inspiration and go from there. Divert, see what you can change, and go make awesome game. We got 3. We came up with 3 game ideas today, so
somebody make one of those.
Make one of them.
I also am curious why YouTube flagged the comment about Chris having pizza. I have no idea why that comment was so controversial. Do we have pizza haters in chat? Let's see. So many good ideas with the easy part. Yeah.
Doom cart, cup cart. Wow.
Let's see. To Mr. Game in chat, we agree that it's harder to come with interesting. I think it's easy to come up with unique game ideas. It's harder to pitch them. It's harder to make them a marketable product. Because I have played a lot, and I mean a lot of indie games that are just
The
so off the
wildest mechanics,
wall.
right?
Cruelty Squad, I think, is a really good example of that. And when you're doing like one offs in that respect, it's very hard to market that. Again, it's why inspiration is such a big point. Because if you can say, well, my game's just like Hollow Knight, or my game is just like Darkest Dungeon, you kind of have a lot or a good aspect of the marketing done for you.
For you, right? If you're coming out of the like, no one's seen this mechanic, and I mean,
Mm-hmm.
hey, if you could come up with a brand new wacky mechanic that like works and actually like, wow, good job. Uh, but I mean, a lot of oh geez, Josh, I lost my thought again. What's going on?
If you can come up with a unique aspect, or if you can come up with, when you are taking from these games, you that helps your marketing, but you still have to again prove to people that there is something unique here, that there is
Right.
something worth it beyond just saying this is another Mario Kart game, this is another Doom like. And I mean the
They
boomer. Oh, go ahead.
it's akin to like I've heard it said that someone wants coffee and so they're walking and Starbucks is right across the street and you pull up in a van selling coffee and you're like, buy my coffee, and they're like, who the what?
Mm-hmm.
They're gonna go to Starbucks, right? So you'd have to like come up in a cool van, market it,
Mm-hmm.
like not scream in their faces, and maybe have good quality coffee and all the other stuff all around. But that's kind of what it is, right? So it's like coming up with unique, really cool,
Mm-hmm.
creative ideas. Yeah, you can do that all the time. But then again, I think if you can get past the pitching and the marketing part, right? The prototyping and getting it to
Mm-hmm.
work and all that is just that's another whole another issue. Another podcast, guys.
So what you're saying is I should next time I go to a book fair, I just throwing my books at people. Here, take
Yeah.
this book. Take it. Here. Angry author gets arrested attacking people with books.
By the
Yep.
seventh one and the eighth one.
Yeah, there you go. Yep. And again, like how you market this is a major point about how these games succeed. And like we've said before, and this is its own other topic, that once you see a game blow up, it's way past the point of trying to copy that exact game. And this was the final point I had before I forget. Exactly, Chris. I remember. I remember that episode too. But the timing is everything when it comes to this. That by the time you see another game blow up, you are unfortunately past the point that you can try and do a game
Too late.
similar.
Too late. You're gonna have to wait to the next cycle, right?
Yeah,
You're gonna have to wait till zombies come back around or Fall Guys comes back around. You're gonna have to wait a while.
yeah.
You can't be chasing the car. Um,
Once
you
it's
know,
pulled off like that,
yeah,
like again, like everyone who tried to copy Among Us, they were too late. Just like everyone who tried to copy Fortnite,
way too late.
and
Yeah,
it's unfortunate because you may be in that situation. You could be developing a game similar. You had
yeah.
no idea about Among Us. You had no idea about Fortnite,
It's common.
and
It's very
the
common.
rug's been pulled out from under you at that point.
Literally, they don't even know the other, because a lot of things are under NDA, right? So it's not like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, everybody knows what's being developed. People are working on things in the secret. They're getting ready to develop it, and then another AAA is like, yeah, here's our same thing you're making, but way better with a lot more money. And you're like,
Yeah, and again, you have to be able to do. Thank you, Chris. We're having our own little ARG or after action report about pizza story here, our own visual novel. There we go. A pizza visual novel. There you go. There's another idea. It's a visual
Trump.
novel that you play, and if you type in there pizza, a pizza guy will come and deliver it for you. Man, we're having
And then we're
so
gonna
many
have
good ideas.
a shoot 'em up Tetris, another one. So that's two Tetris ideas, but Hey,
There you go. Get pizza in there, and I think we got a winning idea here.
yeah, man. We're gonna get some awards for sure.
Yeah.
BAFTA, baby.
Yep. Timing is unfortunately everything when it comes to this. And you have to, and again, this is why we say you have to be aware of the market. Because if everyone is working, if you're working on a game, you hear somebody else just release this big game that looks very similar to yours, you're going to have to pivot. It's not the guy who already came out that has to change it. And it is unfortunate like that. And why so many people, so many Slay the Spire likes, haven't found their footing. And if you do stumble across that unique selling point, if you do figure out, hey, I made the Slay the Spire game, but it does this thing that no one has ever done before, you gotta market the heck out of that. You have to shout that point from the rooftops. Yes,
I've literally seen articles that be like, just like we're saying, for example, we're saying darkest dungeons without what, Josh? What would we be missing for darkest dungeons?
without the dungeons or without the
Yeah,
difficulty.
darkest dungeons without the dungeons. You're in a park instead. I've seen articles like that, like
Hmm.
IGN, like that's their headline. It's this game, but without that,
Yeah.
and that's a huge selling point. Like that's a big deal. That's a real good deal to do.
Yeah,
Yep.
I mean, when Slay the Spire blew up, everyone's saying, hey, this is a roguelike, but it's with cards? There's decks? And now all the games like, hey, it's just like Slay the Spire.
Yeah. Right. Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And when that came, I remember it came out when that first came out. People were like, "Yeah, I'm playing this game called Slay the Spire. You ever heard of it?" And it just blew up, and every journalist in the world. It
Mm-hmm. And, history was written that day. But
was indeed, Josh.
I think this is a good place to go. Plus, I'm getting really hungry, and if I don't put something that's either pizza or non-pizza related in, I'm going to collapse, and then we're going to have a situation here. But there you go. I want that pizza machine from the Zumbinis game from back in the day, where you just type it in, just pumps out pizza and ice cream. There we go.
Got it,
Next
man.
stream is going to be all about pizza. There we go. Pizza Elden Ring. We'll cross the streams.
Yes, sir.
But I think we will say goodnight here. And as always, thank you everybody for tuning in. Do the liking, subscribing, commenting, and all that. If you want to follow me and Discord, Twitter, that is up there in the top right as well as down below.
And for me, same thing. Links are down below. Follow me on Twitter. I do stream game development, so follow me there. And we'll always be here to talk more about game design.
And pizza.
Josh, and pizza.
Yeah.
That
I guess
kills
we
the
have to do a
pizza
pizza stream at some point. When we hit 10K, we'll bring a pizza on
Yeah,
the
that's
stream.
great. Yeah.
There you go. I know. Next spicy topic: worst pizza. There we go. Worst pizza and Elden Ring is terrible. We'll piss everybody off there.
Let's do it, Josh.
For those of you watching, if you want to tune in live if you're watching this record, if you want to tune in live, we do them 5 p.m. on Saturdays. And again, check out the Discord, all that great stuff. And have a great night. If you can get pizza, feel free. You have our blessing to have pizza tonight. And come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where he's in the art and science of games. And yes, thank you, Chris. 5 p.m. ET. So, have a great rest of your weekend, everybody, and see you next time. Take care.